A better title might have been When Dinosaurs and Dim-Witted Tribal Leaders Ruled the Earth. Hi guys, so before we get into it, a very quick reminder that you'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist. Yes, this is a Hammer film, and there will be spoilers today for this 53-year-old movie. So I decided that it was time for me to do another one of Hammer's fantasy films, but I've had mixed results with these when I've tried to watch them in the past. So for example, 1 Million Years BC with Raquel Welch, I loved that film, thought it was great, very glad that I bought the Blu-ray. On the other hand, Prehistoric Women, as it's known in the UK, I did not like that film at all, so I did not know what I was going to get with When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. Storyline-wise, this is a combination of those two films I was just talking about, really. So on the one hand, from 1 million years BC, we take this idea of humans not being top of the food chain. They are living in the dinosaur era because this is a fantasy film and we can just make the rules up. From Prehistoric Women, on the other hand, we take this idea of blonde people being the lowest class in society, which is kind of weird. I don't think it worked that well in Prehistoric Women, that idea, but it works a lot better actually in this particular film. So to give you a little bit more detail about the story, this is almost a tale of forbidden love in the Stone Age sort of, or the Jurassic Age or whatever. So we've got these two characters, Sana and Tara. Tara is a guy, and they fall for each other at some point during this story, and they sort of decide to run away together because Sana is blonde, and blonde people in this world are not meant for marriage. They're meant to be sacrificed for the sun god once they're of a certain age, but Sana's not having any of that. So once she gets with Tara, they stay out of their tribe's way, and eventually they run away together. And the last third of this movie is almost like a chase movie as they're running away from the tribe. And all the while, we've got these dinosaurs and other creatures just hovering around the area, just chomping down on anybody, good guy or bad guy. So as a setup, it's not bad. I mean, it's nothing I've not seen before, but absolutely fine as a story template. It was directed by Val Guest, very dependable pair of hands. Off the top of my head, I've seen 4 films by him. So he's the guy who did the first 2 Quatermass films, the 2 black and white ones with Brian Donlevy. He did Hell is a City, The Full Treatment. All good films. I'd say Hell is a City is the only possibly mediocre one out of those 4, but even that film is pretty highly regarded among the old-timers who've actually seen it. In terms of actors, I didn't recognise anybody on the cast list coming into this, that there are no Cushings or Welshes. I did, though, after I'd watched this film, go on Wiki and look up some of the careers that these people went on to have. And tragically, the 2 lead women in this, the 2 women who are highest on the cast list, they had really tragic lives after this movie. So Victoria Vetri, who plays Sana, the blonde woman, she went on to get married 4 times in her life, and her 4th husband she actually shot. She didn't kill him, but just the fact that she made the attempt meant that she ended up getting 9 years in prison. She was in her 60s when she did this, and I think she only got released quite recently in her 70s. The other woman, Imogen Hassel, she fared even worse after this movie. She had a really bad run in her private and professional life and ended up committing suicide at the age of 38. So some real tragedies happened to some of the people who were in this film, but let's not focus on that. Let's focus more on what they managed to achieve when they were in the prime of their careers, because this movie is pretty damn good. It's definitely more of the quality of 1 million years BC than Prehistoric Women, I'm happy to report. What I really enjoyed about this film was the fact that it made me feel really emotional towards the characters. I don't just mean the 2 lovebirds, I mean all the human beings in this film. I just really felt for humans as a species in this, trying to exist in this hostile environment. And I don't think I even felt this with 1 million years BC. I mean, I really enjoyed that film. It was fun watching people poking stop motion creatures and seeing Raquel Welch in a loincloth, always good. But I think this one, When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, it's just got an extra layer to it, I think, because it was very thought-provoking, this whole story, this whole world that's being created, I found myself just realizing for the first time really just how lacking knowledge people in the Stone Age were. I don't just mean technologically, I mean in terms of their understanding of their surroundings and their world and the sun and stuff. It's easy to forget in 2023 just how lucky we are in terms of all the scientific knowledge that we have pretty much from birth. You know, we know that the sun is not going to desert us for millions more years. We know all about the weather and what causes it, and we know that the other planets are out there, and thanks to Christopher Columbus we know that America exists now. Sadly, just kidding, I love America, but you know, we have knowledge about the world and the galaxy that gives us a little bit of comfort as we go about our lives. But people back in the Stone Age, or whatever age it was, they didn't have that, and you can see in this film just how uneasy it makes them feel in their day-to-day lives, you know. And the best example of this is in their attitude to the sun, because the people in this film, they might not yet have a developed language, but they still perfectly understand that the sun gives them heat and light, and without it they're probably screwed. And what makes it even more worrisome for them is that at the end of the day the sun just goes away somewhere and then doesn't come back for quite a few hours. So probably they're worried that maybe one day the sun won't come back. But the fact that it comes and goes at all clearly means that it's probably a person or a god. It's not going to be a thing. So for them, I guess it's as if a god is looking down, judging them constantly, watching them, and that's why they feel they have to make sacrifices for this god. Now, I wouldn't normally like seeing sacrifice in a movie, or I certainly wouldn't ever agree with it, but in this movie I at least sort of understood it to a certain point. You know, I could feel the fear behind the people doing the sacrifices. I could feel their fragility and their fear in this overall world, and it did make me feel something. The moon, the use of the moon in this is interesting as well, because I didn't notice this for the longest time in this film, but there is no moon. It suddenly appears near the end. Now, I didn't know if the film was just making this up about the moon, the fact that it would come along at a certain point in the Earth's lifespan, because I always presumed that the moon would have just been there from the very beginning. But no, apparently, according to this film, humans lived for a while, and then suddenly the moon was born one day for random cosmic reasons. But insofar as this story is concerned, it's a vital component of what allows certain characters to escape, because it really freaks the tribe out when they suddenly see the moon appear for the first time. And because they're living on a beach, it makes the waves move because of the gravitational pull, but they don't understand that. They just see the sea going chaotic, and probably some of them are thinking that the moon is actually the sun, but it's lost its powers, so now they're all doomed. So you can imagine the chaos that ensues. And what's also really clever is the fact that because the tide's going out for the first time, this reveals some giant crabs that it turns out have been living just slightly out to sea, but previously covered by some consistent water. So that's a clever way of getting more creatures into the action late on. But I just really felt the fragility of the humans in this film. But while I'm talking about the ending, I will quickly mention this film's one weak spot for me, which is the manner of our good guys' escape, because they get this raft, or this like wooden thing, and the tidal waves that are coming at the end, they're so big. I mean, they're washing people away on the beach. They kill the leader, and they look pretty vicious, but for some reason they just very gently wash over our main raft, and our good guys are protected because they're holding onto a rail apparently, and that's enough. I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit of that. I'm sure if this had been a real thing, that raft would have been absolutely obliterated and our main characters destroyed along with everybody else. But I'd enjoyed the film so much up to that point, I was willing to sort of turn a blind eye to that one moment. The actual dinosaur action in this is superb, and I think it's cool that they don't just use the most famous types of dinosaur. So there's no T-Rex in this, there's no raptor, but they do use a lot of species that were real. You just might not have heard of them, although you might recognise them sort of by sight. But there are so many other threats in this film as well. It's not just the dinosaurs. So there's a moment where a woman gets sucked into this random plant that's like a giant plant. There's also a guy who dies because a python just appears out of nowhere and wraps itself around him and suffocates him to death. There's another moment where a woman just stumbles into this quicksand trap and gets swallowed up. It's a strangely satisfying moment given which particular character it is that suffers that. But this world is just harsh. I mean, there is death everywhere around every corner. People can just die in this film in so many ways. The special effects are very good for the time, but I can appreciate that I am a man of a certain age. You know, I grew up in the 80s watching films like Sinbad and Clash of the Titans. My first experience of special effects were seeing stop motion stuff with skeletons and Medusas and giant lobsters and things like that. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how youngsters these days would take to films like this. I did do a little experiment when I was watching this film, because it suddenly occurred to me halfway through to get the opinion of my son as to what the effects look like in this film from the perspective of a 12-year-old. So I dragged him down during one of the dinosaur sequences and I said, hey, look what I'm watching, what do you think of that? And he sort of looked at the screen and he was horrified. He was like, oh my God, how did people ever watch this? But maybe if he'd have watched the film from the start and followed the plot, he would have gotten into it and the effects would have been less important at that point. You know, if you just come downstairs halfway through a film and just look at a dinosaur sequence out of context, filmed in this way in 1970, maybe you're not going to appreciate it. But it does kind of make me think, are people still going to be watching Hammer films 100 years from now? Am I a dying breed, you know? But I guess that's it's nothing that I can affect. It's in the future, you know. There is one more thing that I did want to mention in this review. In fact, it would be wrong of me to let this pass. So there's a really smart thing in this where Sana goes to sleep in a dinosaur shell, a cracked dinosaur shell, and its owner comes back and finds her in this thing, and because she's in it, the dinosaur presumes that Sana is her baby somehow. So for the rest of the movie, Sana has got this dinosaur on side, including all of its offspring, which not only brings a much welcome bit of lightheartedness to the whole affair, but it adds a nice little kink to the plot, because Tara and Sana are sort of outnumbered for most of this, and the fact that they get dinosaurs on side, it just kind of levels the playing field a little bit in terms of the struggle between our lovebirds and the main tribe. But I just found the relationship between Sana and the dinosaurs absolutely adorable. Normally at this point of the review I would show you the version of the film that I own, but I don't have a copy of When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. I think it's about £20 to buy on eBay, which is not cheap. So given that I'd not previously seen it, I didn't really want to spend that kind of money, so I looked around for other means to watch it. Unfortunately though, you can't find this for free on YouTube. Sometimes you can with older movies, not this one. I did go on Prime to see if I could rent it on there. Sadly, it's not on there either. So in the end, I found it on a streaming service called Ratuken, something like that. I had to go through the rigor of registering to this thing and then paying my £4 rental fee or whatever it was. So I had to go through a little bit of hassle to watch this movie, is what I'm getting at. I almost skipped this movie, actually. I'm not watching all the Hammer films anyway, just the ones that I want to watch, kind of a thing. And it did cross my mind, should I just pass over this one? But I'm glad I didn't, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is right up there for me with 1 Million Years BC, and now that I have seen it, I do eventually want to buy this and add it to my collection. Right, that's all for today, but before we go, let's check the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this movie. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 bloody axes out of 5. I think that's the same score I gave 1 Million Years BC, but I think this movie has the edge, I would say, and maybe it was very unlucky not to get 4.5 actually, but I'm satisfied with my score. 4 out of 5 it is, and I will leave it there. I'll be back soon to do another Hammer review. Until next time, cheerio, bye bye.